Good morning. Who's ready for a nap? Right? Today will be a nap day. I laid there about 6 a.m. after being awake for 30 minutes thinking, at what point did I reach the age where you got up and went to the bathroom just to try to go back to sleep and it still didn't work? And, it's just laid there and laid there and laid there. And whatever. It is what it is. So good morning. Glad to have you all here. We are almost to March. We are almost to our actual anniversary. Our list of upcoming events is getting longer because we have a lot coming up. So starting this Thursday, we have a British a cappella ensemble who is going to be here called Apollo 5. Jonathan is very excited about this group, and my job is to inspire you all to be super excited about this group too. He said, you're not going to want to miss it. They're phenomenal, phenomenal. So they're going to be in the church, and I encourage you all to be there Thursday evening. I don't have a time on that, but I'm sure they'll announce it in church. 7:30. 7:30 this Thursday. Apollo 5, and there may even, is there any sort of food or anything afterwards, Kay? No, okay, fair enough. Not that you're doing. Okay, fair enough. And then a week later on the 27th, our big hoorah, our big bicentennial service. If you remember, we decided to do it then because our actual anniversary is on Ash Wednesday, which is not a very celebratory sort of day. So we are going to have it on the 27th. It is going to be a big, big, big to-do. The bishop will be here. Lots of the bishop staff will be here. Lots of other clergy throughout our diocese and convocation will be here. Other denominations and faiths in town will have clergy representing them. There will be some dignitaries here. The governor has even been invited because he's Episcopalian and friends with the bishop. So who knows who will be here, but there is sure to be a big crowd. I would encourage you all to be here early to get a seat. We do expect the church to fill up. In fact, we already have plans to use this room for overflow seating if necessary to live stream the service in here. I don't know if that'll be necessary or not. Hopefully it won't, or maybe hopefully it will. I don't know. It just sort of depends on which way you want to look at that. But anyhow, the balcony will be filled before we use overflow. So get here early. The service is at 6. I'm telling my acolytes to be here at 5. So figure out your own arrival time, but don't get too close to 6. Jonathan's starting music about 5:45. Trumpets, organs, chimes, there's all sorts of things going on. So get excited. Cynthia.
If anybody would like one of these stickers for a laptop or water bottle or whatever, I'm going to put them on the table back here. They are free for the taking. They're the bicentennial logo. Bicentennial logo.
After the service on the 27th, things don't slow down. That Sunday on the 2nd, we have First Sundays on the Fisk. And then the following week is Shrove Tuesday on Tuesday evening, Mardi Gras party. Be sure to RSVP for that, please, if you've not already. Call the office and let them know that you're coming so they can plan for food and that sort of thing. I should say the same about the bicentennial service. If you've not RSVP'd for that, let us know just so they kind of have a general idea of head count for the reception. And then the 5th, of course, is our anniversary, our birthday, but it's also Ash Wednesday, so I encourage you to come to Ash Wednesday services that day. And then wrapping up the week will be our final, I know, tears, our final Bicentennial Forum on the 9th. Nan Harper, hopefully, if she doesn't have a grandbaby, will be leading that in the church about altar guild things. And so we'll go through the history of the altar guild a little bit, talk about all the linens, the hangings, the colors, the vestments, the vessels, and kind of go through all of that. And maybe even show off the new newly renovated sacristy as well. So we have a lot going on. It doesn't stop there, though, because then Cherry Blossom comes at the end of March, and there will be a lot going on during Cherry Blossom Festival. We will be hosting the Old City Flower Festival at the church. This is where different churches from around town come in and decorate different areas of the church. It will be just a glorious thing that Jenny has been coordinating for us. At the same time, there will be an art show that we are coordinating in here and maybe out in the hallway. I don't really know yet. And so that will be going on. Since we're going to have all of those visitors in, we thought that it would also be appropriate to do some guided tours that week. And so we'll be doing a couple of guided tours each day. Susan Welsh is going to do stained glass window lectures on Wednesday of that week. So, okay, there's a lot. We also have some exciting news about our coffee table book, Sacred Reflections. It will be available to pick up no later than the bicentennial service on the 27th, okay? I hope that they'll be available next Sunday. In fact, that was our plan before I had to change this slide 2 days ago. They were in the midst of boxing up our books to ship, and they were doing one final quality control check and found some pages that were smudged. So they have had to disassemble all of the books, reprint a few of the pages, and then reassemble all of the books to ship out. I have implored them to get the books here by this Friday. I hope that that happens, but my strategy there is more to make sure that they're here the following Thursday. So we will let people know if the books will be available next Sunday. Fingers crossed they will, but if not, they will be available during the reception after the bicentennial service.
If they're coming on Friday, be sure to give them Robert's number or someone who can meet them.
I'll be here.
Oh, you will?
Don't worry, yeah.
We just don't want them to.
Absolutely, yeah,
sprout legs.
yeah, of course. Yes, ma'am.
You know, we got those little things that said who the books were going to. How hard do I have to hunt to find where I found?
You don't. We have a list. We have a list of who ordered books. Yeah. Yeah, but if you want to buy more books, we'll be happy to. But to that point, on the 27th, you'll be able to pick up a book, flip through the pages, touch it, feel it, smell it. And then after you do that, I'm sure you'll probably decide that you probably need even more than you already bought. So you will love it. It will be wonderful. But watch for an email letting you know when to pick those up. Also excited to announce that we have revamped our visitor experience at Christ Church. And so we have developed another book that's already at the printer called our guidebook. The guidebook is going to be here by Cherry Blossom Festival. I'll show you some pages of it in just a minute. This is the cover of it. In addition to the guidebook, we're also revamping our fold-out visitor map that we have had for a long time. The new map will be full color, professional, color pictures of things in the church and that sort of thing. It will be a beautiful sort of addition to that. Really all three pieces. So soon we'll have a beautiful free map to give people, and then we'll have this wonderful souvenir that people can purchase that will be very affordable. And then you have the nice keepsake coffee table book. So they all three sort of fit together very nicely and build on one another, which is great. We also, oops, yes ma'am.
Thank you.
Oh, you got it. Also, the bicentennial Did You Knows that are in the bulletin every week. People, I think, have enjoyed those throughout the year. In fact, we've had some people that come to the church to get last week's bulletin because they missed church and they wanted to keep it and, all of that. Well, we're going to make life easy on you. And so we are publishing all of those together in one pamphlet. So we will have the bicentennial Did You Knows, the full collection available in May. And so that will be coming out. So if you don't want to continue your collection and have a stack of bulletins from throughout the year, you'll be able to buy one booklet that will have all 45 or something in there. So that's coming. Here's some sample pages from the guidebook. It's going to include the most detailed set of descriptions and narratives about all of the things that we have in the church that we have anywhere, really. It will be very similar to listening to a Susan Welsh lecture about our windows. Maybe not quite as detailed as that, but a lot of the content came from there. And so it will be a beautiful sort of supplement and companion piece to our coffee table book. You can see, like, when we have pages about the windows, we have little detail shots of details of the windows that people don't necessarily see or even find difficult to see, even when they're standing in front of the window. And so that will be available by Cherry Blossom Festival. Expect it, the price will be like $10 or $15, very, very low cost, but it's designed to be like the souvenir that people, the casual visitor that comes to the church and walks around, wants to take something with them, and so this will be a wonderful piece. But because of all the information in there, I imagine most of you will want a copy of it too, because it's very descriptive and very educational in a lot of ways. I want to thank Susan for doing the two forums in November and January about the windows. They were wonderful, and like I said, a lot of the content that she goes over made its way into that guidebook. She was very involved in that, so appreciate her. We've thoroughly covered so far this year the evolution of the exterior of the church, the interior of the church, the history of the church, all those things. And so today's purpose is to really turn our attention to the campus, the grounds that we sit on, and how those have evolved over time. You've seen this picture before, but the very first construction that happened on this land was in 1833 when our original church building was built. It opened in 1834. This is a drawing that Mary Baber did of the church. It was a modest brick building. It had a dome on top. It was in the shape of a Roman cross. It was expanded in 1842 when they added some additional pews and they added a bell tower. I'm curious about the bell tower because I don't have any documentation about it, of whether it was added onto the church or whether it was external to the church, like a lot of churches had external freestanding bell towers. So I'm not sure if it was external or incorporated into the church. This is just one of the drawings that she did out of a series that we have gone through earlier. The original church stood exactly where the current church stands, and from all of the sort of notes, piecing together notes and things like that, I imagine the dome of this church was very close to where our chancel steps are now, because references to where people sat in relation to where they sat in the original building and the new building and that sort of thing. And of course, the first real evolution on the campus was replacing the original church with our current building. The original building was taken down in 1850 very carefully, and the new church construction started in 1851, incorporating as many of those original building materials as possible into the new building. It opened in 1852 and was consecrated in, I think, May of 1852. I have found myself down in the basement over the past year looking for things and scouring around for who knows what. And it's just really fascinating when you're down there and you just look over and you see these brick walls and this brick foundation, to think that those are bricks from our original building from 1833. It's neat to see, although it's not that glamorous. I promise you, it's pretty dusty and dirty, but it is neat to see. The next step in really expanding Christ Church came in March of 1879. That was after John L. Jones died. That's him on the left. He had long wanted the church to have adequate space for Sunday school. And so after he died, his wife, his widow, Julia Jones, used some of their assets to pay for the construction of Jones Chapel. And so that was built in 1879. It was, as you read last week, it was dedicated February 9th of 1880. So last week it was 145 years old. This is an old picture of Jones Chapel from the 30s or 40s, I believe. Hard to say. It's really the only old picture we have of Jones Chapel that I've found. It's very interesting to look at. You can see that there was an original window on the front of the building. You can also see that it was in some state of disrepair, which was sort of its story for many, many different phases of its history. You can also see that the memorial garden was a parking area, so you could pull in and park right next to the chapel before the wall was erected on the alley. That window, some people will ask, that is not the window that is on the back wall of the church. It was a corresponding window. There was one on the front and the back. This one fell into disrepair and had to be removed. In fact, there are pictures of it boarded up at one point. But you can see those doors are looking, I mean, rough. Like rough. Those might even be doors outside the actual doors. It's hard to say. There may be doors behind those. I'm not sure. And of course, here's Jones Chapel today. It has clearly been restored beautifully over time. But you can even see some of around the arches of the doors, it's some of the same sort of mortar that sort of stands out, even from back then. So you can kind of see. Tim, can you grab me the laser pointer? Sorry, I forgot to grab that earlier. One of the great features of Jones Chapel, of course, is the mosaic on the front of the building. And this is also the subject of a Did You Know? I don't know if that one's run yet or not. The mosaic was done in 1980 by Stephen M. Solomon III. It might be behind Markeisha with the broken drawer. The mosaic depicts the creation of man and is adapted from Michelangelo's painting on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, which is there. I'll kind of flip back and forth, and you can kind of focus on different parts, like the fingers. The hand position is identical. Thank you. The bearded God. He artfully cropped the painting, thankfully. But isn't it? I mean, it's pretty remarkable, right? Especially when you look at it side by side like that. Really, really beautiful. It is composed of about 9,000 Venetian tiles, each 3/4 of an inch square. Mr. Solomon collected these from around the world and spent about 2 years arranging them in his backyard very carefully to get the shading and the textures and the coloration and everything just right. But just before the mosaic was done, disaster struck. And a big storm, sort of like we had last night, downed a giant tree in his backyard right across the mosaic and cracked it, broke it. And in only a faithful sort of way, instead of just throwing his hands up and saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it, I'm done, I'm over it," he persevered and stuck with it because he knew how important it was to the church, and went about restoring it and repairing it. He had to remove about 500 of the tiles and replace those. They had to use hydraulic jacks and screws and levers and all sorts of things to bring it back and unbend it, bend it back into its correct level so that it could be installed. They had already installed the bolts on the building for it to slide on and be installed. So they had to get it back to where it would fit those openings. But they were able to do that. He fixed about 500 of the tiles. And if you go out there today and stand right under it, you can see very faintly a crease down the middle where it was cracked and repaired. Very interesting. Oops. Here's the interior of Jones Chapel today. It has also undergone many, many renovations over the years. On the interior, it has been adapted to a variety of changing needs over time. And a lot of those uses were not even related to the church. Renovations have included adding housing in some of the side rooms, adding additional classroom space. The kitchen was installed in 1908. And then the most recent major renovation was in 2016, not long after Harriet had left, that she had sort of spearheaded. And that was when the decorative screens that are here on the wall were installed. Those screens, you may be aware, or maybe not, but those screens are screens that were taken from one of our old organs in the church. When the organ was moved in 2000 up to the balcony, and this organ was removed, these screens were repurposed onto the back wall of Jones Chapel and cleaned up and that sort of thing. And so those are historic in their own way. And then just last year, the stairs that used to sit about right here going up to the balcony were taken out for safety reasons and to open up the space a little bit more, which is great. The rose window on the back wall is particularly stunning. So stunning, in fact, that it found its way to the back cover of the coffee table book. A little preview there. But it is gorgeous. It utilizes all of the major liturgical colors: red, green, gold, purple, blue, and white. Of particular interest is the emblem in the center of the window. It features an ancient Christian symbol that depicts the doctrine of the Holy Trinity. It is referred to oftentimes as the shield of the Trinity, and details the interrelationship between between God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The Latin inscription tells us that God, Father, and Holy Spirit are all unique from one another. That's the non-est. Yet all three are manifestations of God. And so it's a particularly meaningful emblem in the middle. Today, of course, Jones Chapel serves a lot of different purposes for us. It's an alternative worship space like we have here with the Feast of St. Nicholas and other services, but it wasn't always like that. There's been a lot of other things that happened in Jones Chapel. The chapel was not originally consecrated. It was dedicated but not consecrated. And the reason was that back then, especially, when you consecrated a chapel or a church, it set it aside exclusively for religious uses. And the church wanted to maintain some flexibility and versatility of what they might want to use the building for. And so they didn't consecrate it intentionally. It has since been consecrated in 2016, but correct me if I'm wrong, Cynthia, the consecration today perhaps isn't seen quite as rigidly as it was back then. And so we would still maybe be able to use it for other purposes if needed, but back then that was sort of a no-no. So
I think feeding the homeless could be considered a religious
certainly,
activity.
certainly,
Basketball game, maybe not.
certainly. Back then, as making 1879, right? So there were lots of needs for meeting spaces in town and social areas and spaces and that sort of thing. So I think they felt like there might be a need to use that building for things other than religious purposes. So that's why they didn't consecrate it originally. It has served as a meeting space. It was a National Guard facility at one point. It was even the meeting home for the Boy Scouts for a while. It has gone through large phases of time when it was unused and vacant. It was a storage facility. It was, and sort of fell into disrepair because it wasn't being cared for or used that often. But it has been restored, of course, and serves as this alternative space for us for St. Nicholas, rooted services. And of course, it's the home for our weekend lunch ministry, where we feed our guests every Saturday and Sunday nice hot meals. I want to go back real quick to the renovation in 2016 of Jones Chapel. I wrote about this last week in the bulletin, but this is when the ceiling was done that is particularly unique. It is a nighttime ceiling, star ceiling that Phil Gross laid out. He's a consultant for planetariums. Okay, so he kind of knows a little bit about stars and stuff. So he painstakingly laid out and designed the ceiling and worked with the crew to paint the ceiling just as the night sky appeared on February 9th, 1880, when the church was dedicated. And so when you look up, that's what the sky looked like that night. So there's a historical aspect to that, which is lovely. The different stars are painted different sizes based on their brilliance in the sky. Constellations are there. In fact, as part of the process, members donated money and were able to adopt certain stars and certain constellations on the ceiling, which is lovely. There are very few of these sorts of ceilings really in the world. The fact that we have one right here behind us in Jones Chapel is pretty remarkable.
Is there a chart that says which stars belong to whom? I think there's a constellation that a group of people did for Harry.
Yes, there is that I've seen that. Yes, it does exist. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hopefully someday we'll do something for the wall in the
Mm-hmm.
chapel. It's on the list.
It is.
Hasn't quite made it to the top.
There was some talk about doing something to recognize that this year, but we just had too many other things, and so we do hope to make that work. I mean, we'll find some appropriate time, I think. This is a Sanborn insurance map of Macon, at least our block, from 1884. This was 5 years after Jones Chapel was built, and so you see it located right here behind the church, the chapel. To the right of the church, you can see the Herald House. It's referred to as dwelling. DWG is what that stands for. Dwelling, and here is where Julia Jones and John Jones had lived. You'll also see across the street a house labeled Rectory. This was the first rectory of Christ Church. The Ladies' Aid Society had raised money and purchased and built this house across the street for rectors and priests to live in, right across from the church. The first rector to occupy the rectory was Otis Glazebrook in 1879. That rectory opened the same year that Jones Chapel was built, 1879.
Russ, is that the building that's across there now, or is that?
It's kind of where the parking lot is right now.
Okay, so it doesn't exist anymore.
That's right. That's right. It's kind of orienting myself from the church. It was to the right. Well, it says it's to the left of the alley. I don't know. It might be where Lester Miller's office is, but it's not the same building. No, that's not a historic building. It is not that building. You can also see the Baber home across the street, the dwelling here, and despite maybe not wanting to see this on maps like this, I'll also draw your attention to just about every dwelling has homes behind it that are labeled servants' home, including Julia Jones and John Jones's home, and including our own rectory. Those, of course, have all been demolished and taken down. The servants' home here, though, interestingly, is just about exactly where we're sitting, is where it was. Right, here's the cloister coming right across here. This is one of the photos that we have of the home of John and Julia Jones, which kind of sat right where the parish house sits now. It was a gorgeous columned home, white columned home. This was taken sometime before 1926. I know that because that building was built in 1926. When Mrs. Jones died in 1886, so she died 7 years after her husband, she asked that the rector at that time, who was Reverend Winchester, be allowed to live in her home. I find that a weird way to word that, but essentially she wanted her home to become the rectory. And so the rectory across the street was then rented out by the church, and her home became the rectory for some period of time. This is another picture you've seen before, but Julia Jones's estate also provided funds to build this brick building just to the left of her home, and that was the Julia Jones Benevolent Home, a home of respite for women from the church and beyond. Let's see where I am here. This picture, it dates to some 1891 to 1893. And then this is another version of that same sort of shot. And then this is the best picture that we have of the Benevolent Home. It was a beautiful building. This was after it was no longer the Benevolent Home. That shut down in 1936. And the Bibb County Welfare Department, you see their name above the door, took over the facility. So this is sometime after 1936. The building was eventually demolished in 1957. The church still, so it was built where this office building is past the parish house, okay? The church still owns and still retains that land. We executed a land lease for the office building that's there, and so that is still technically church property, even though the office building is an office building. Let's see here, go through my notes. Some of you may recognize this. This is the cornerstone of the Julia Jones Benevolent Home. It resides right here in front of Jones Chapel today, right here on the sidewalk. Interestingly, you can see it in this picture. It's right there. It was retained when this building was taken down in 1957 and kept by the church. But there it is in its original location, which I think is a neat thing to see. Let's move forward to the next phase of growth for Christ Church. That was in 1922. It was decided that Jones Chapel was no longer sufficient to meet the needs of the Sunday school classes, and so the rectory, Julia Jones's home, was commandeered to become the first parish house to provide more room for multiple Sunday school classrooms. A new rectory was purchased, and so the rectors were not displaced for too long, and it became the parish house. However, it wasn't long before the church decided that it still wasn't big enough, and we needed to plan for a much larger parish house. That sort of coincided with our centennial celebration. That fundraising was going on in 1925 on our 100th anniversary. The building was built in 1926, but they had already started raising money in 1925 for that. In 1922 is also the year, so when the home became the parish house, that's when the city allowed us to close down the alley that came right through here. And so that essentially allowed the church to all become one big wide property. The rectory, Julia Jones's home, was moved in 1925 around the corner to 3rd Street. It stayed there for some length of time and was eventually torn down. I don't have details on that. But this is the very first picture where we see our current parish house. And so this picture was taken somewhere around 1927, 1928. You can see how clean and fresh and new it looks with low landscaping and that sort of thing. So it was a pretty new building when this picture was taken. So that's our first glimpse of our parish house today. You have something, Kitty? Okay. This, of course, is the cornerstone of the parish house, and as you read in another Did You Know, that is not just a cornerstone, it is a bit of a time capsule as well. There are a number of interesting things that are enclosed in that stone. A copper box was placed in there that included a Bible, a prayer book, a list of church members, a list of members of the church school, which was something that was being operated at that time, a list of non-members who contributed to the building, which is a nice thing, a copy of the 1925 history book, a copy of the program from the centennial celebration that they had in 1925, a current issue of the Chimes, and a copy of both of Macon's newspapers at that time. It also includes the small, I guess small, I've not opened it, but it has to be somewhat small, cornerstone of one of our mission churches that we opened in East Macon, St. James. And so it has another cornerstone inside it, which is fascinating. I said St. James, St. John's across in East Macon, I'm sorry, St. John's. Here's a picture from 1938 of the parish house. And interestingly, you can see it used to have, it's hard to really see back there, but it used to have this cross right above the door. That's not there anymore. Something that was affixed to the above the door. And another little detail that I love about the parish house is this very interesting cross that is at the top. If you've never spent any time looking at it, it's a very unique cross and very distinctive the way it sits above the gable there. This is a shot we took this past spring of it, and I noticed that our tree has already started to bloom this year, so I'm not surprised by that. This is a great picture of the parish house at dusk. Even though it shows all the idiosyncrasies of a 100-year-old building and all of the issues that come along with that, with maintenance and that sort of thing, we have updated many spaces throughout time, including just this past year. We updated the parlor. The men's restroom is going in. At one point, it was the offices. I remember doing our premarital counseling in what will soon be the men's restroom. That was a lovely place to do your premarital counseling. But it was Huey Gardner's office at that time because that was before the Herald House was being renovated and prepared. I'll also add this about the Great Hall. The Great Hall has been used for a lot of things now. We know it as a fellowship hall and a place for concerts and luncheons and dinners and things like that. But it's also been a lot of other things over time. In fact, at one point there was a basketball goal attached to the far wall, and it was a basketball court. It was a bit of a gym. And you may never have noticed this before, but an errant ball, whether it was a basketball or a kickball or something, took out one of the lanterns above the Great Hall, and an exact replica could not be found. They did a fine job trying to match it as closely as possible, and you probably have never even noticed that mismatched lantern, so forget I said anything. This is the cloister garden from the 1970s, nestled between the parish house and the church, of course. You can see here the parapet wall, the crenellated parapet wall that was above the cloister for so long. It must have been removed, and I have asked many people who have been around beyond this when that happened, because it was removed. I even asked Tony Long, he didn't know, but we came to the conclusion that it must have been because of some sort of structural water damage behind the wall that it had to be removed. And so now you don't have that. This is a lovely shot taken from the very top of the bell tower that we took last year. It is about as glamorous to get up there as it is to go in the basement. But it does provide an interesting perspective. And I wish I had more information about our wonderful cloister garden gate. I don't know the details of when it was installed, the fence and the gate. We know when the walkway was installed, but I don't have any confirmation of when the posts were installed. But man, they are solid and they're awesome. The walkway, of course, was installed in 1968 by Calder Payne in memory of his brother. It's possible the gate was installed then, but I just don't know. And the bricks, of course, when we did the walkway, there's two different sizes. There's traditional size bricks and there's these larger square bricks. The original intention was to use all square bricks. Those are bricks that were from Julia Jones's garden and the garden of what became the rectory after that. But there weren't enough, and so they ended up having to mix those in with traditional bricks, which is what you see now. And of course, this past year, we bricked in the sides around the sidewalk to make a lovely little bricked courtyard, which is just a great little space that I think everybody's really enjoyed and loved already, whether it's for lemonade in the lawn or a small little intimate wedding, you know, that you could see happening in the garden. There's a lot of uses for this space now that it was.
Well, and some of the square bricks that we had left over, we made a walkway back in that garden that's really nice
Yeah.
to walk through with some of those Jewish bricks.
That's right. That's right. Moving forward, we have the Herald House. The Herald House has a lot of interesting things associated with it. It came into the church acquired it in 1955, but it is the oldest structure on our campus. It was built around 1850. Our history book says it was built before 1850, but we're just going to go with 1850 as the date. Haven't been able to confirm the exact construction date, but the history book clearly says that it dated to 1850. So it would predate the actual church. Now, we call it the Herald House, but the Heralds never actually lived there. In fact, they certainly weren't the original owners of the building. They did not come to Macon until much later. It was, for many years, and the very early history I don't have, but for many years it was rented out, and for a long time it served as a boarding house for women who were working in Macon. It was also then rented out just for individual rooms. There's a litany of things in the archives of the city where you can find people whose addresses were the same as the Herald House. That doesn't mean they owned it, it just meant that they lived there. Here's an ad from the newspaper in 1908. It was called Hymouth Hall, where it was, they also seemed to operate a bit of a restaurant where you could come and eat for 25 cents. Businesswomen were 15 cents. They got a discount if you were a businesswoman. This is another Sanborn map, but you see here it's described as a young women Christian boarding home next to the church. So it evolved over time as well. Now let's talk a little bit about the Heralds in the few minutes that we have left. This is a young Dr. Charles C. Herald, likely before he was Dr. Herald, from the looks of it. He was born in 1878 in Americus. He died at the age of 69 in 1948. That's probably more what he looked like later in life as he was practicing. He married a woman named Helen Sophia Shaw in 1906. They had 4 children, although 2 died very, very young. Their first son died at 11 months old, and their second daughter died during childbirth. One of our chimes, which will be chiming again next Thursday at our bicentennial service, was given in memory of that daughter who died during childbirth, and she's listed on the plaque in the narthex. Her name was Mary Fogel Herald. This is a picture of Mrs. Herald. It's the only picture I have of her with 2 of her children. She was a remarkable woman. Listen to this. She was active in the community and was a leading suffragette in Macon. She holds the distinction as being the first female alderman elected in the state of Georgia. She was elected in the very first election that was held after women won the right to vote. She served on the Macon City Council for 17 years. Quite the accomplishment in that time, now as well, but think about that in that sort of climate, what that looked like. But listen to her other accomplishments. She was chairman of the city's Health and Charities Committee. She led the establishment of the city's first public health department. She was president of the Diocesan Women's Auxiliary here at the church. She served multiple terms on the vestry. She was president of the Women's Auxiliary for the Medical Society of Georgia. She was on the board at the Macon office of the Red Cross. She was one of the 40 charter members of Pilot International here in Macon. She headed the women's division of all bond sales during World War II. She was long active in the Girl Scouts, was president of the local chapter of the American Association of University Women, and was the first president of the Macon League of Women Voters. And she was also an officer in the Macon Council on Human Relations.
I came to Macon in 1957, and I lived with her for 2 months.
No kidding.
And she was absolutely amazing.
Amazing is an understatement. To say she was a mover and shaker would be a gross understatement, right? So what an incredible insight into her life, right? Here you can see the Herald House all prepped for the big hotel demolition this past January. We took great measures to protect it and the windows and all of that. In 1955, a few years after Dr. Herald's passing, Mrs. Herald sold the house to fend off commercial encroachment on the church. And that was wise because next to that was a Gulf gas station at one point. So there was a gas station where our parking lot is at one point. So that proved to be very insightful. The Herald House went through a major renovation in 2001 to allow all of our offices to be housed in that building. And here's a couple more interesting connections with the Heralds you might find interesting. Mrs. Herald was born in 1878 in Baltimore, Maryland, to William Checkley Shaw and Leonice Moulton Stewart Shaw. If those names ring a bell, those are the two people whose the Matthew 25 window on the left-hand side was given in memory of. If you read the inscription on that window, it describes them as father and mother. It does not say that this window was given by Dr. and Mrs. Herald, but it had to have been given by Dr. and Mrs. Herald for her parents. So the Heralds paid for this window. Awesome, right? It's a gorgeous window, lots of significance that you can read about in our guidebook. In addition, the Holy Family window, the back left corner. This, of course, was given in memory of Anne Shaw Richardson. There's that Shaw name again. She was Mrs. Herald's sister. Now, Dr. Richardson and the Richardson family paid for this window to be installed, but the familial connection between Mrs. Herald and both of these windows is very interesting, to say the least. I'm going to skip past the Baber residence because it's technically not even part of the church campus because we're a little short on time, but this is a great shot from a drone above the church showing our whole campus, how it sort of evolved over time and what it looks like today. Generations of our congregation have been very intentional about adding to, repurposing, changing, altering this campus for new uses over time. And with each new addition or renovation, great care is taken to honor both the historical legacy of this place as well as our current needs that we may have. Buildings this old require a lot of work and a lot of maintenance. Please thank any junior wardens that we have had or currently have, because they do yeoman's work in keeping this place operational and working. Who knows what our campus will look like 200 years from now, but it looks pretty good to me now. So this is my last forum for the year. I'm so glad you're here today. Don't forget that March 9th we're going to have the last one on the Altar Guild in the church, and don't forget February 27th. Be here or be square. So, thank you guys. We'll see you. Have a great one. Go get a nap.